you got to make sure when we do that, you don't go too far. Because like I said, I'm only 2 in.
Yeah, no, I won't. I won't go too far. I promise. We'll talk Fallout later. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the Grimdark Media. I'm back with Jay today, and we are doing the patron pick for April. And this is actually, it's technically for May. It's going to come out around the end of April, though. But this was Mad Max Fury Road.
Witness me!
and this was a runaway pick, actually.
I just want you to know that I appreciate the fact that you've got a bunch of art on the walls and you got your record player behind me. And that is the only reason why I don't have Wilton's silver aerosol air spray with me right now.
Fair enough.
We were shooting this in the warehouse.
Yeah.
It would get way worse.
There'd be a lot of
fast.
edible spray paint on his face right now, which you can buy at Michael's, which,
So I'm skipping ahead, but one of the things I thought was funny about that is part of the trivia for that spray, because obviously they're just using
baking spray.
Theoretically in universe they're using just aerosol spray and getting high off of it as well.
Yes, they're using something not.
But when that movie came out, the edible spray had like 3 or 4 Amazon reviews on it.
Okay.
And within like a month of the movie came out, it had 19 pages of reviews.
Tens of thousands.
From Mad Max fans.
Yeah, absolutely. People buying it and being like, this was the tastiest face spray I'd ever owned. So this is Mad Max Fury Road. This is George Miller's 2015 return to the post-apocalypse. And if you don't know George Miller, between his first 3 major films, which are Mad Max the Warrior, and Mad Max Beyond the Thunderdome, which are from the late 70s till the mid 80s, he became a children's director.
Yeah, it was Happy Feet, the
Babe Pig in the
movies,
City. Yeah,
Babe
Pig
in the City.
But he is one of these Australian / New Zealand / sort of like Pacific directors who has had this incredibly sort of like different career making crazy movies. And I would argue actually Happy Feet is a post-apocalyptic movie because it takes place in Antarctica.
It definitely has one of the most depressing scenes I've ever seen in a kid's movie.
And also Hugo Weaving as the main bad guy. But this is a return basically in 2015, 30 years later, with a ton more money, a ton more technology to the thing that made him the most famous.
The most famous, yeah, absolutely.
And this is kind of his trajectory as a director is a lot like Peter Jackson's, and that Peter Jackson's known for these like horror movies, like Bad Taste, Brain Dead, these early sort of like crazy horror movies. And then he makes a family movie, which is The Frighteners.
Yep. And
then he gets Lord of the Rings. And he creates Weta out of like butter sculpting friends. Like they have this crazy sort of trajectory on their careers. So Mad Max Fury Road, it's 2015. It stars Frankie Pulitzer, everybody's favorite rapper. You don't have this album. Frankie Pulitzer's on this one, which is Tom Hardwye. Also from Venom and lots of other things you've probably seen him in. I love Tom Hardy as an actor.
Well, you've never seen him
Band
in
of Brothers,
because no matter how many things he's in, he's always covering his face now. That's his job.
Yeah. He's briefly in Band of Brothers. And he's playing the titular Max. Although there is some in-universe debate as to whether this is the original Max Rotansky, who is a cop, basically, who flees the violence in the city, thinking there'll be safety in the country. There is no safety in the country. And he is our pre-fall post-apocalyptic character in the first Mad Max film that eventually becomes the Road Warrior. He becomes this like archetypal Road Warrior. And this set of films...
Literally the archetype.
Yeah, this set of films defines this car combat genre for the next 50 years. Like there's nothing. I mean, Death Race arguably is around the same era, but it's the only thing that's as car comedy as this.
One of the things that I really liked about this movie is that I think George Miller has always been given credit for sort of creating this as a genre.
Right.
And the first successful Western movie like this came out 4 years before the first Mad Max movie, and it was another Australian movie. And he pays homage to this because that movie was The Cars That Ate Paris.
Right.
And the main villain car in the Cars That Ate Paris is what the Raiders look like who end up intercepting Furiosa when she first breaks away from the path she's supposed to be on.
They got their crazy feather cars. They're like bird-like.
They've got like the rusted,
sort of like rusted spikes and stuff like that. And of course, this has gone on to inspire video games and RPGs and
Car Wars
and Dark Future and like literally 1,000 million games. So
have you heard of that Gaslands game? I heard that.
I heard that's pretty good actually. Yeah. No, I heard it's pretty good. The Venn diagram of gaming and this series of films is there's a whole lot of overlap.
This sparked people's imagination. Like this series of films sparked people's imagination in a way that very few things outside of, like, say, Star Wars and Star Trek as isolated franchises really did.
Yeah. And so on top of Tom Hardy, we've got Charlize Theron playing Furiosa, who is, and this is timely that we're doing this movie now because that film's about to come out.
Yeah, the prequel.
With
Anya Taylor-Joy.
Playing as a young Furiosa, who's going to basically be telling her story. Nick Holt actually became relative. I think he was in Warm Bodies before this, but like he was in a few things. But Nick Holt really made his bones on this one.
I can't remember. Was this before or after the first X-Men movie he was in? But it's around.
No,
that time.
this is after that.
Yeah.
But like he was just because he played Beast. He was just starting to come up. This is around the same era actually as those like first class X-Men movies. Hugh Keys-Byrne, Rosie Huntington Whiteley, Riley Crow, Zoe Kravitz, Abby Lee, and Courtney Eaton.
So I'm gonna throw back to a couple things on that. So first of all, Keys-Byrne, I always get his name wrong.
Yeah.
He was also the villain in the first Mad Max.
He was
movie,
the toe cutter. He was the Night Rider.
He was the toe cutter.
He was
not
the Night Rider. Not the Night Rider. That's right.
You have to remember the Night Rider every time you look up at the night sky.
Yeah, that's right.
And the other thing is, I'm sorry, I should have written it down, but because Nicholas Hoult is in this and he's Beast in those the James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender era of X-Men movies. Did you realize that Slit his pole guy on the back of his car,
his war boy?
that ends up being the one riding on the hood of Max's car at the end?
Yeah.
I forget the actor's name, but did you realize that's the same guy who plays William Stryker in that era of X-Men movies?
Josh Hellman. Yeah, it is. Oh, weird.
Yeah, he's like the super clean cut. Like if you guys picture,
he looks like,
if you guys picture Alan Ritchson from the Reacher series, only not as bulky.
Yeah.
Like he's like the super clean cut, all American looking guy.
He almost looks like the guy who plays whatchamacallit, who plays Cyclops. I'm looking at him here.
But he's actually he plays William Stryker in those prequel era movies. The guy Brian Cox ended up playing in X-Men too.
Yeah, and there's some classic actors in here. Of course, Richard Carter plays the Bullet Farmer. John Howard plays the People Eater. Angus Sampson plays the Organic Mechanic. It's one of my favorite names for the doctor guy. Who's gonna have him bleed out. Melissa Jaffer plays the Keeper. And then Richard Norton plays Imperator. Jennifer Hagen plays Miss Giddy. We've got a ton of just like great.
I mean, there's all these other characters, but let's be honest, everybody's favorite character in the movie is clearly the Doofour.
I was just gonna say that guy's name's Iota. Only name.
Yeah, because he's like a weird tech musician guy, right?
Yeah, Iota is the guy who plays the flaming guitar hanging from the front of a truck.
Which apparently he does play.
Yeah,
and
just does.
Like apparently the flames are all triggered off the whammy bar, so he actually is the one shooting the
flames.
Just
a real thing that happened.
Yeah.
And this was in box office pre-production hell for years and years and years, and they finally sorted the money out for it.
So imagine that, but think about that, right? Think about the fact that the hard part of getting this movie made was people thinking it wouldn't be successful, so they couldn't get the money for it.
So to be fair, people aren't us, and as much as we have watched all three original films hundreds of times going into this. This was a comment that you and I made off camera earlier. No one thought this movie could be for everyone. No one thought this movie could make its budget back, being the insane post-apocalyptic that it is.
It was for everyone. It is for everyone.
Yeah.
And two, it was a raging success.
I think it won a bunch of effects Oscars. Wasn't it I can't remember if it got awarded, but I think it won a bunch of awards. And it had a budget of $185 million, including all the ad revenue, advertising cost. Which, if you guys don't know,
you're 50-50 usually.
You're looking at about 75 to 80 million production, maybe 100 million production, and 85 in advertising. That's the thing people don't really realize is that most of launching a movie is half your budget goes into selling.
Yeah, so when a $200 million movie comes out and makes $300 million, and everybody talks about how it lost money.
Yeah, that's
because a $200 million movie usually cost about $400 million by the time you saw it.
Yeah, and this movie made $380 million box office, which means not post sales, not DVD sales, not streaming, not anything else. $380 million asses in seats, which is huge.
And again, it was massive on the home video market because one, people love the movie and they wanted to own it. And this is before it was as common to get that stuff on streaming. And two, I think it was within 6 months of it coming out on home video was when they released the second home video release of it, which was the shiny and chrome version, which is all black and white.
Yeah. Which is crazy.
Which, again, completely sold huge.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive in then, as we have now waffled about how much we like this movie quite a bit. And we will...
did we give that part
I
away?
think we might have probably given away the fact that we like this movie quite a bit. And we're going to go through our plot synopsis. We're going to try and keep the movie episodes of this down a little bit because we run 2 hours sometimes on these things because we get
Every
so
one of these
excited
we do are longer than the movies themselves.
than the action movies themselves. So we're going to make, like, if we could do Thundar in like under an hour, we can definitely do this in under an hour. So we're going to set, I guess, Into the Wasteland because it was hard to know who was crazy, me or everybody else, which is the opening line of this film, and set Bon Voyage into the post-apocalyptic wasteland of Australia.
Pack your bags and chew off your fingers. It's time for Bon Voyage.
All right, so in Bon Voyage, we spoil most everything. Obviously, if you haven't seen this movie, go watch it before you do this. If you haven't seen this movie, what are you doing with your life? Like, this
Yeah,
is
I mean, come on, man.
almost 10 years old now.
You've had 9 years to see it, and everyone should have seen this movie. And we talked about this off camera. Even if you haven't seen any of the previous 3 movies, it doesn't matter.
Irrelevant.
Just watch it;
Yeah.
you'll still love it.
Irrelevant. And we're gonna get to why when we get to, I think, the breakdowns of this movie, because it is super well done. But our film opens with Max. Although we don't know which Max, he's just in profile. We see his car, his cool ass Interceptor.
1973 Ford Falcon.
Yeah, Ford Falcon Interceptor, the last of the Interceptors. There's a guy. Speaking of which, there's a guy that has that car here in St. Catharines and goes to all the car shows. I don't know if I've told you that before, but if you want to drive in that car,
I have a thing I have to do.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'll text you this summer if I
do.
see it. I'll tell you.
All
I'll
right.
text you this summer if I see it. But there's a guy that does all the car shows around here who has that Ford Falcon.
Which is crazy because it was never available in North America.
No, which means he imported it,
Yeah.
or he kit built it out of a North American Ford Falcon, which is entirely possible too. So anyway, if Jay disappears because of car theft, you guys know what's happened.
They'll never catch me.
Yeah, and we just see him sort of silhouetted against this like endless sea of dunes, this like empty wasteland desert. He stomps on a lizard, little 2-headed Brahmin lizard, and just immediately eats it. And you can hear him ruminating on his life. He's spying some stuff in the distance, and we are immediately led into a chase in which what's great about this is if you assume that this is going to be our hero who's going to have a car and do car driving stuff the entire time,
It don't go that way so much.
we're immediately disabused of that notion because his car's trashed. He's like kidnapped by these pale-skinned like weirdos in their like
albino
monster cars.
juggalos.
Albino juggalos.
They're albino juggalos.
They are albino juggalos. Yeah, I'd never thought of them like that, but they're basically albino juggalos. Yeah, they all look like they're on their way to a VNV Nation concert. A lot of goggles, a lot of very pale skin. And he gets taken back to the Citadel, which is this massive spike of rock, which has a tiny bit of greenery on it.
It has more greenery than you've seen in the
Period.
previous 3 movies combined.
Yeah, period.
Yeah.
Except where the kids are. Except in
Fair
Thunderdome. Except in the crash site where Captain Walker leaves the children. Whole other movie. I don't know why we're talking about this, but he's taken there, and we get almost the best exposition we could possibly get in the first few minutes of this movie through his capture, incarceration, branding, blood bagging.
It's the same format as like Soldier,
Yeah.
where you're getting all this exposition with 0 dialogue.
Zero dialogue. It's all visual exposition. We're learning that this place is run by these war boys. They are effectively the standing army of it. It's ruled by someone called Immortan Joe, who we kind of see briefly, who is this like enigmatic masked figure, massively sort of powerfully built, but also kind of seemingly held together by
Yes.
pseudoscience.
He looks more like he was formerly massively well built.
Yeah.
Because even his plastic outer shell that they use to
with all those little medals on it.
hide everything has like sculpted abs and everything like that on it.
Yeah, which is great. He's
I gotta
got
get that thing.
I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah, I gotta get one of those.
one of those back brace slash torso builders. And eventually Max manages to kind of escape, and he runs through the Citadel, and we get to see these sort of like moments and flashes of like life inside of it.
Yep.
And clearly it is held above the masses and kind of like the shanty town that is below. Through the power of the war boys, through a giant lift system that like takes you up and down from it. So it's unassailable. You can't get into this thing or out of this thing. And Immortan Joe is worshipped like a god.
Yeah, he's the God Emperor. He's like the Emperor of Japan pre 1940. That kind of vibe.
Yeah, exactly. And so as he tries to escape and he runs out, he eventually gets to what he thinks is a doorway, and we don't really realize how far he's above ground because he grabs a chain to swing outside. We haven't seen it yet, and he kicks out the door, and we realize he is hundreds of feet in the air at the top of this citadel, and he swings back in and is just kind of like sucked back in by the war boys, and this is kind of our opening moment with him. And
yeah, because after that happens is when you get the movie logo.
That's it. That's when it starts.
We just get to it now.
Yep. We finally get our like launch trailer, like what this is called and what it is. Some sort of background on this. There's a lot of theories as to who this enigmatic Max is. I don't think he actually ever says his name. Does he
does
say
at
his
the
name?
end, because after when he thinks Furiosa is dying,
that's right,
in a war rig, he says, "My name is Max."
That's right,
and he is credited as Max Rockatansky.
Rockatansky, okay,
in the credits, but
there's theories as to who he actually is, and it's theories that are backed up by a slight amount of evidence. Because one, if this is 80 years after the collapse, the Max Rockatansky pre-collapse in Mad Max would have been long dead. There's no way they would have survived. They'd be 100 years old, right? There's no way they'd be alive at this point.
And the hints to that are just the fact that the wasteland has gotten worse.
Has gotten so much worse.
Yeah.
And we know a little bit more about that because Furiosa is set 60 years after the collapse, 20 years before the events of this. And Furiosa's in this film as like being middle-aged, right? She's in her prime basically, but she's not a kid the way that she is in Furiosa.
Yeah, she's like 40s, something like that.
So we have some kind of idea of the timeline. The most logical person for who this would be someone from Max's adventures who had encountered them and basically taken on his persona. And the fan theory that is the most popular is that this Max is actually the feral kid from the Road Warrior, who is basically a child who is living in the wasteland by themselves outside of this small community that's like operating a gas pump. And Max effectively rescues and sends off on the bus with these like people at the end of it all, and basically idealizes him. And the piece of evidence is that at some point, one of the many of Martin Joe's brides ends up with this music box.
So in the Road Warrior, the feral kid is constantly just making all these grunting noises, which by the way are most of the noises Max also makes in this movie. He only has 52 lines of spoken dialogue.
52 lines in a 2-hour movie.
The rest of it is a lot of grunting.
Or just gestures.
But at some point to settle the feral kid down, he gives him this tiny little music box. And then by the end of the movie, the feral kid's gone one way, Max has gone the other way. So Max doesn't have the music box anymore, but it magically reappears in this movie.
That's right. And so this is basically our opening. And then we cut to Furiosa. And at this point, a lot of debate happens as to whether this is a Mad Max movie, if this is really a Furiosa movie, because Furiosa is actually our main protagonist, and our inciting incident actually takes place based upon her actions. As we realize that there are these young brides that Immortan Joe has, he's trying to fulfill his genetic line. My favorite is, I always get his name right because I want to call him Odorous Urungus. It's not Odorous.
Rictus Erectus?
Rictus Erectus.
Which is the best name ever. Dead?
One of Immortan Joe's sons is Rictus Erectus, played by
Nathan Jones. He's not just for fighting Tony Jaa anymore.
That's right. Aggression era WWE star Nathan Jones. And I'm pretty sure committed criminal because I'm pretty sure he's been jailed a whole bunch of times. That was part of his bit. I think he's a bank robber. I don't know, man.
I think he was a bank robber.
He's really leaning into the Australian stereotypes.
Yeah.
And so they are basically plotting like his genetic sort of like dynasty, and he's trying to have all of these. He's trying to have children basically, so that the hold that he has over the people is reinforced.
Again, back to that emperor analogy. He's clearly trying to do the royal family type thing, but there's clear evidence with the two characters that are identified as his sons that they are not genetically well.
No, well, there's the one that's the spy son, who is just like a misshapen lump of a thing that is looking at the spyglass and keeping an eye on everything surrounding the area. And there's Rictus, who is. He is all muscle, no brains.
But he also still clearly needs whatever is shoved up his snout to survive.
Yeah, exactly. That whatever the poison that's in the world is causing miscarriages and stillbirths. And so we have the sort of like exposition about the area now. We realize that Immortan Joe's power over the people is water.
Yes.
And that he is able to crank open basically an underground wellspring and dump water on the shantytown beneath. And that is why he's worshipped, why he has the power he has, why everything basically is maintained in this town. And we get the idea that this sort of like tenuous power is kept 99% because of that, because he has the control of the water, and that no one can really stay on because it's in this fortress no one can get to. And as long as the war boys worship him and he controls the water, everything will be under his control. So enter Furiosa. She's missing an arm. This is Charlize Theron's character, but is clearly incredibly competent, quiet, and powerful, and is very at odds with the rest of Joe's lieutenants because she is not part of his family. She's not a war boy. She's clearly here because of the merits of being Imperator Furiosa. There's few people that live in the Citadel that obviously are there because of their talents. Like the Flesh Mechanics one, Furiosa's one.
The other
Imperator. These are people that they just need. Their skills are needed to keep everyone under control. And she's basically inspecting what's called the war rig, which is a huge transport that's used to move things back and forth and trade with other settlements, and is about to go on a run. And as she goes on the run, we get our inciting incident, which is Immortan Joe realizes his brides are missing.
You know what's funny? I just rewatched it last night. Does he realize they're missing after she turns off the road?
I believe it's around then because there's a radio transmission that happens.
Yeah,
that's when she starts turning off the road because the sidekick, one of the war boys, who's kind of like the boss war boy, she's on a mission to like do trading, and we realize something's wrong in a moment, and it's when the brides go missing. So she's out on her mission basically, and you realize that this lieutenant is now suspicious of her because they've gotten a call from back in the Citadel that the brides are gone. And she basically kills him, and Joe sends a search party to go and try and bring her back because he realizes she's kidnapped the brides. She's on the run with the war rig. She's going off the road to, I think they're going to Bullet Town or Gas Town, one of the two towns.
Yeah, I forget which one they're originally going to, but it doesn't matter.
It doesn't really matter. And so she's on the run, and Joe sends out a war party to go get them of war boys. Now our main war boy, Nick Holt, he's not doing well. Nux is clearly dying from whatever the thing is that's slowly killing Half-Life war boys.
But luckily,
he's got a blood
they
bag.
have medicine, which is Tom Hardy with a straw.
His sweet blood transfusion. So they strap him to the front of the car, put a blood bag on Nux, and then him and...
They just run a line from Nux to Max.
That's it. And him and Slit basically get in their cars because Slit thinks he's going to take over the car.
Yeah, this is his promotion.
This is his promotion. As soon as Nux dies, Slit gets it. And the Flesh Mechanic hooks Tom Hardy up to him like a blood bag. And they go off chasing
Also
Furiosa.
like a front bumper. So, yeah.
In one of the most iconic scenes, he's got a bite mask on made out of a garden trowel, which I think is fantastic.
So
and they go chasing Furiosa. A massive fight. And it's funny because this won't take, I do think this episode won't take that long because so much of this is action. And we can't describe every
There's
second
only
of
really
how
like
amazing
4 or
the
5
action is.
set pieces, and then you're kind of,
And the incredible action of this scene is this car chase. There's a massive fight across the war rig. Eventually, they manage to fight off their attackers, but after a huge car crash, we have Nux, who is basically what's his name is Max is loose. Nux is somehow still alive, and there's a giant storm that they drive into to get away from all of this that sweeps everybody else away. So this massive sandstorm comes. Furiosa bunkers down with the brides.
So basically, Furiosa and the brides are inside the war rig, but all of her bodyguards that aren't in on this, they're on the outside of it. So when the sandstorm comes up, like the visuals of people like just
get ripped away
everywhere, like just ragdolling all over the place.
Yeah. And then Nux crashes with Max. Slit gets away, but they're left basically semi-buried in a sandstorm and with a mostly functioning war rig. And then we have this great scene where they're digging themselves out. Nick Holt basically and Max have it out, but Nick is like desperate to like
they're still chained together.
Yeah, Nick is like desperate to basically like survive. And he's slowly coming on side with the rest of like what's going on with Furiosa, because realizing Furiosa is trying to get away, that there's like he has this moment of like he believed everything was one way, and now he's suddenly believing that life can be another way because he's interacting with the brides.
Well, before that, though, there's great choreography in this fight scene, right?
Yeah.
Because there's the scene where Max gets the gun, the clip comes out of the gun.
Yeah.
And Nux gets the clip, Max has the gun, and the three of them are fighting, like Max, Nux, and Furiosa. You don't really know who's who. And then finally, Nux, like, smashes the clip down on the ground and holds it upright so Max can get it into the gun. Yeah. It's awesome.
And as this is happening, they're forced basically to cooperate because the new pursuers show up.
Yeah.
Right. And the new pursuers, as Immortan just called in all of his favors, and everyone is now after them. Literally everyone. The bullet farmers after them, the eaters after them, all the people that were other nearby towns get called in to come chase them. And as they're trying to work out like who everyone is and how to get away, they're forced to cooperate because they're all going to die if this, like, as the sandstorm's now cleared in the morning, as these people like come and chase them and try
because
and, like,
we've talked about the war rig as a transport and as her job, but it's also the trade good that Joe owns that they need because it's supposed to get to them, which
is
I believe it's not.
Oh, no, it's milk, isn't it?
It's a very specific kind of
That's
milk.
right, it's mother's milk. Yeah, I forgot.
Because when he washes up, that's the one who's like, what is this?
What is this? And it's milk. That's right. Yeah. It's so weird. It's so it's very weird. But basically, they're also sitting on a pile of Joe's assets that he needs to trade for gas and bullets and everything else to the other towns.
And that they need to get,
and so,
which it's going to presumably take a long time to get more.
All three of these groups now have like an investment in chasing down and killing these people and getting these goods back. On top of the brides, which are also what Joe is personally really invested in getting back. So they managed to get the war rig running again. They managed to start fleeing again, and they're going to head for what and nobody trusts anybody. Like, Furios is ready to kill them all at the drop of a hat. Nux is basically hiding through most of it.
Through the first 45 minutes, I was going to say there's no point where Max doesn't have a gun pointed at one of the other characters.
That's right. And Max is trying to point a gun inside everybody else. Like, it's a whole lot. And eventually they're kind of forged together by this pursuit. They get the war rig moving. They start moving again after the sandstorm clears. So they're heading towards a pass now. They're kind of cross-country, across road. And we get to see all of these incredible characters, like the bullet farmer, which is the guy who makes bullets, who looks like I don't know how to describe the bullet farmer. He has like an aviation cap on, like a World War I aviation cap on.
But if you think about like an old school judge's wig where it's like the curly white hair, he's got a thing like that, except it's made of bullets.
Yep. And then we've got the eater, who is just this massive... he's got like a fake nose because his nose is rotted off. He's got giant goat feet, and he's just like propped up like in his like, I don't know, like giant death wheelie chair. That is his car. It's really something. And the character design, of course, in a George Miller movie is amazing because, again, we talk about how you don't have a lot of tell. The show is everything. Yeah. So you learn so much about who these people are just by looking at them and their character designs
and like
their
costumes. Very short interactions with other characters. Yep. Like, they're all incredibly well written. They're incredibly well shown. And you don't get any traditional linear exposition. Yeah.
Like, you realize the people eater is like an accountant. His whole thing is like counting all the bullets and beans and bandages, and like that his like consumption basically in accounting is like his life. The bullet farmer is obviously this, like, he thinks of himself as this like sword of justice, this like weird judge, jury, and executioner.
We get more of that later.
And we get more of that all later on. And then we've got a Morton Joe in the Giga Horse, which is the coolest monster truck / Cadillac /
other Cadillac
Yeah, or either do that or it's like a Ford Fairlane or something like that, like buzzed together. I don't even know.
And apparently it's fully functional. Like, it's one of the things
they built to
just drive it around.
They built all these cars. Yeah. It's amazing. The Giga Horse is really something. And they are on the move, so they're chasing them. And Furiosa says she's going to try to get to the green place to give these girls the many mothers they can be protected. And you start to get the sense that this is like where she's from. That she had a life before Morton Joe, before being an Imperator, that she's been desperately trying to get back to her entire life. And this is like foreshadowing for Furiosa, where obviously it's the beginning of that journey, right?
Right.
And they're chase. There's fighting. We get to see Rictus Erectus in all of his glory with a giant double-barreled like squad automatic weapon shooting just randomly in the air for no reason for most of it. Just firing bullets. Just shooting guns and yelling. And eventually it is. But they buy themselves more time by getting to this mountain pass and breaking through and collapsing it behind them. And this thing collapses behind them and stops basically because as they're being chased, it collapses behind them because they managed to destroy. I think it's the
basically
soundtrack?
beset by raiders, right? Yeah. Like the other raiders who have the cars that look like the cars from
the people they're trying to deal with to get away. Yeah. And that goes wrong as they're getting away from Morton Joe and everybody else, and they end up having to flee through it, and that's what blows up the pass and effectively stops the pursuit for a while. They get into a very strange place after this. It's like a chemical swamp. It has weird stilt monsters walking through it. They're kind of slowly driving through the fog.
So it's interesting because when you describe it, if you haven't seen this movie, right, you would think, it's dark and dank and overcast. It's not. It's really interestingly physically portrayed because it's nighttime, but it's almost actively blue lit.
Yeah,
by
it's
everything.
glowing.
It's and apparently the way they did that was they shot all of that during the day and then just flipped all the color filters on everything.
Yeah.
But it's a very weird effect. Like it would be something cool to use for other horror movies.
And they don't really spend a lot of time on this place or in this place because there's these weird things like out in the mist that they don't want to.
And they get stuck because it's like a bog. It's like a swampy marsh.
They sink into it.
But their way to get out of it is they're going to winch the truck to this thing up ahead, which one of the brides points out to the war boy is called a tree.
Yeah, they none of them ever seen before.
Right, and there's one tree in the middle of all this area.
Yeah, and so they winch themselves out. They get themselves moving again. And they manage to get to the other side of it, back where there is more desert. And as they go through the desert, they start to see sort of like bits of civilization sticking up over the ground. And eventually they find what looks like a power station, like a power thing. And there's someone screaming for help, and it's a naked woman screaming for help. And this is the famous
and
meme
even if
line.
I was going to say, even if you've never seen the movie, you've seen the meme.
You've seen the meme.
Because it's Tom Hardy pointing
going,
up saying, that's
bait.
That's bait.
That's bait. One of his 52 lines is, that's bait. Because he recognizes a trap when he sees one. And of course it is. They're assaulted by motorcyclists who are all female.
They're not really assaulted by them because this is where Furiosa gets out.
Yes.
And tells
they're briefly assaulted by them, but then the woman up in the tower comes down, recognizes Furiosa because she yells, "We're looking for the many mothers. We're looking for this and that.
I'm from this tribe."
That's right. And then they come down and you realize that this group is what's left of the many mothers. And there are not very many of them. There's, I think, 3. They're all relatively old. And they are now basically sand nomads. And they ask, "Where's the green place? What's the way to the green place?" Because she thinks she's come home and she's met these outriders.
Yeah, we just got to keep going. It's just over the next
keep going. These emissaries were placed, and she says, "We just came through it." And that's what's left of the green place.
And that's that tree, right? Like that's the tree is all that's left of that, which they have also ripped out of the ground by pulling the rig
which
out.
is destroyed. And whatever that swamp was, that poisoned area
used to be the last
of the green place. Yeah. And we realized that this like slow death of the planet is ongoing. That everything is actively getting worse all the time. Furious has a complete breakdown, is completely despondent, and we realize that there is a real their quest was basically futile. There's nowhere to go.
Yeah.
There's nothing to do. There's nowhere to go. And so after some debate with the group and everybody basically like fighting over like what they should do next, even the girls are despondent, they decide that instead of running away anymore, they're just going to run back.
Well, so the original plan, right, is that there's a salt flat in front of them.
Yeah.
And they have enough food, water, fuel, whatever, to just drive in a straight line for 180 days. So they decide we're going to drive in a straight line for 180 days. And Max is the one who comes back and tells them that there's nothing out there. You're just going to drive for 180 days and then die.
That's it.
And then proposes that they just drive back through everything they just came through.
Yeah.
It's the fetch quest part of a video game where you have to go back through an area you've already cleared. Except the enemies are 10 times tougher. It's so much worse. And so realizing like that Max is the only one who would know this because he's an outlander. He's not from there. He's from the before time. And he's been making a map, which you only see briefly.
Yeah.
When he's marking where the Citadel is on the map, but he has an idea of where there are and are not things.
Yeah, and that this salt flat is just basically the beginning of an endless nothing.
It's the beginning of the end.
Yeah, it's the ocean is what it is. Yeah. If you think about it, it's a dried up ocean. If what would a salt flat be at the edge of a desert in Australia? It's the ocean. It's the ocean cooked off to the point where there's hundreds of miles of ocean floor basically out into the nowhere.
Which on the plus side, think about it, once that happens, we'll never run out of salt.
That's right. There'll be so much salt. It'll be the most flavorful planet. So flavorful as we cook off all of our atmosphere and or water. And so they do. They get back in the war rig and this is it. This is their only slim, we're going to cling to hope.
Because the whole plan is that everybody competent who's a threat is already chasing them, and if they can cut around them and get back before them to the Citadel, there is no one defending the Citadel.
That's right. The Citadel is effectively empty, and whoever controls the Citadel controls everything. And then short story line, we have the longest car chase scene of the movie, which is basically the rest of the movie back to the Citadel.
Amazing.
It is truly incredible. There are fights between all of the major protagonists. The
Slit returns with Max's car.
Slit does show back having fixed Max's car, which is incredible. At this point, the bullet farmer's blind because he's gotten blinded by a flare.
Oh, that was before that. That was when they were chasing them back.
That's right.
That's where Max disappears into the dark.
That's right.
And then comes back and they're like, "Oh my god, is he okay? He's covered in blood."
Yeah.
And Furiosa gives the classic, "That's okay. It's not his blood."
That's not his blood. Yeah. Max is very stoic.
The people eater is still there.
The people eater is still there. That's right. Yeah. Because the bullet farmer has his like "I'm an angel of death" moment when he's actually blind and he's just
got the blindfold on. He looks like he
yeah.
looks like a classic statue of justice, except instead of the scales, he got two Uzis.
He's
and
got
he's just firing
two Mac 10s just firing in the air. It's really incredible. And this car chase, the one thing that can't be understated about this movie is the practical effects in this film are incredible. George Miller made his bones doing practical effect car stunts in the first three films and doing a lot of things just for real. And I think 80% of the effects in this film are all
when
practical.
he did the first movie, because he also could not get the funding for that movie, the way he raised money was by working as a trauma doctor in an emergency room. So he basically has all this real world experience with what gunshot wounds, car crashes, all this stuff looks like. And he puts it to good use.
He sure does. Yeah.
He uses his powers for good.
What can you and can't you do to get people out of these cars alive, basically? And they eventually make it back to the Citadel. Everyone is effectively defeated through massive amounts of car combat that are hard to describe. But like we have our most iconic scenes. We have the mediocre scene where Nick Holt's driving the war rig and they look over and Immortan Joe stares at him and says mediocre. A few of the sisters are basically, unfortunately, like not sacrificed, but like kidnapped, and they die with Immortan Joe in the back of the car.
A couple of them die.
But not before one of them.
Holy crap, he dies the worst.
Yeah.
People die bad in this movie, and Immortan Joe, who is the villain who deserves to die the worst, no problem, friends. He dies
Definitely
the worst.
dies the worst. You see this chain rip his mask off, and you literally see the lower half of his face get removed at the same time. It's incredible. There's not a lot of gore actually in this movie.
No.
But that's the one scene where, like, even though it's pretty gory, like, you don't give a shit because Immortan Joe's a complete monster and a psychopath, and like, you're fine with it.
Yeah, and it's not even filmed in a particularly graphic or shocking
so fast.
way.
Yeah, it's so fast.
Because the real moment you see the damage is when they get back to the Citadel. It's not even when it happens.
Yeah. You briefly see it when it happens, and it's ripped off, and then you see his body afterwards. And when they get back to the Citadel, the new people are very willing to accept a new overlord in Furiosa. Max kind of fades into the crowd.
And I think what's interesting about this for me is this feels like there's like a tradition in wrestling, right? Like where when you're old and you're getting ready to go out, you put the next guy over.
That's right. That's it.
And in this scene, like, Max does the fade into the crowd thing, but all the end shots of Furiosa are like all of the end shots of Mel Gibson era Mad Max because she's triumphant, but her eye is swollen shut. She's cut. She's bleeding. She's limping. Like, she looks the way Max looks at the end of each of the first three Mad Max movies.
Where they've been put through the complete ringer, and then Max just kind of gives her the thumbs up and then just walks away and disappears into the crowd. And that's our end. Like, that Fury, basically, Max's story in this film is he is entirely a supporting character to Furiosa's story, and Furiosa becomes this new sort of like it's funny because it actually is very much in keeping where Max is almost never the savior. He's the agent of change for these people that end up being saviors to enact their saviors.
So there have been 4 Mad Max movies. In the first one, Max is the protagonist. He's the main character. In the second 2, he's not. But they have such a varied cast, and they don't focus on anybody enough that really no one else becomes the protagonist. So he's sort of the central focal point for the movies, but he's not the protagonist.
The community is the other protagonist. Yeah.
We move one step beyond that to where he's there, but Furiosa is very clearly.
Well, in Thunderdome, Selah, I think is her name, the leader of the speaker for the kids, is effectively the main character, and she does the tell at the end of the movie after Max disappears, and it's basically like the tell of us all, and she becomes in her own.
But what I'm saying, there's like an evolution of that through these movies, whether that's intentional or coincidental. There is an evolution of that.
Agreed, but it's also very prominent in at least the second, third, and this one that he is broken in such a way that he never gets saved at the end of it all. No. He just moves to the next thing that he does because he's basically always outrunning his demons and he's always outrunning the past. And like you do see some flashes of that every now and again in the movie. He'll have flashbacks of save us, Max, or save, like he'll have these weird like trauma responses
And
to certain things.
what's interesting is this is another thing that leans into that fan theory that that it's not the original Max Rockatansky, because none of those save us are characters from any of the previous movies.
That's right. There's someone he must have encountered in between growing up.
The character who
whatever it
refers
is.
to him as Pa is a girl, and
Yep.
the character he loses as a father is a son.
Is a son, exactly. So there's a lot of like Easter egging in there too, that he's got some trauma, and that he's never ever going to be anything but a lone wanderer, a road warrior. This guy who mostly is just trying to continue outrunning his ghosts, but occasionally gets like caught up in these moments where he does the right thing or helps people because he can't not, because it's still in there that he wants to do that.
He's the gunfighter Clint Eastwood is in all of his later movies.
Yeah, he's the pill rider. Yeah, exactly. He's death.
He's
He's
death.
basically death. Yeah, he's a specter of death. And that
Cypher
closes
for all you 40K fans.
for all you 40K fans, and that closes us out. There isn't a satisfying end for Max. Max is just back out in the wasteland when this is all said and done.
And for the record, because the next movie coming out very shortly, like in 5 minutes, is Furiosa, there is another Mad Max movie with Tom Hardy in development as well, which is Mad Max Wasteland.
Fantastic. Well, there's never been a time where George Miller, one, didn't have a lot of time left to make movies because he's been making movies for like 45 years.
Yep.
And two, has the cred to pull off basically anything he wants right now. So we've now wandered back to the Citadel.
We love you, George Miller.
We love you, George Miller. You're the best. We're in the shantytown around outside the Citadel. And nearby, there's the Immortan Joe Gallery and Gift Shop, relics of the past, and you can get all of your own little breathing masks
Everything
and
here
body
is
armor.
unsanitary.
Everything here looks slightly grimy, though. Everything here looks like it was a prop or an extra in a Marilyn Manson music video, and I don't necessarily want to touch any of it.
These people aren't beautiful.
That's
Not the
yeah.
beautiful people.
Yeah, so we got to go inside and check out the Dark exhibition.
Gallery to the left, gift shop to the right. Have your tickets ready for the Dark exhibition.
All right, so in the Dark exhibition, we will always talk about where we think this falls on the landscape in Grimdark media of product versus art. How does this fall? And it's hard in the case of movies typically, where when the budget's so big and you're trying to get asses in seats, for us not to fall pretty heavily, pretty surely on one side or the other. But I'll lead off with this one in that I think this is product, but I think this is incredibly well-made product. I think George Miller, at this point, when you're iterating on something for the fourth time, you know what you want to make, you know who your core fans are, but you also, and this is the particular thing that we're going to come back to, you're also making this accessible to everybody so that it can have the broadest possible on-ramp. I think this is an exquisitely made installment of the Mad Max story, where it has evolved into a very high quality polished product, where George not only has the talent, the skills, the money, and the experience to make exactly what he wants, he's also making it in a way where it's accessible to people who've seen all three previous movies. And also it's just an incredible shot in the arm, adrenaline junkie, experience for people that haven't. What do you think?
Yeah, so I landed in the same place for very similar reasons. It's definitely product, because you're making a movie on that kind of budget.
Yeah.
It's 1995, and you've cast Tom Hardy, Charlize Theron, and even if you look at all the brides, they're literally a who's who of upcoming young
Zoe Kravitz,
actresses,
like all of these actresses, yeah.
right? So there's clearly an intention to draw people to the theater. There's active attempts being made to do that, and of course there is. Why wouldn't there be? But it is, and we've kind of hit on this before with a couple other things. It's one of those things that is product that is being done completely uncynically.
Yeah.
And one of the things we talked about briefly off camera for a multitude of reasons, which if Ash doesn't want this to be 4 hours long, we won't go back into. But is
the 1 hour pre-show.
The sense that I walk away from this from is that George Miller really likes the people who want to go see his movies.
Yeah.
And he's made something that is artistically excellent. Like it's one of the best action movies of its era, or possibly one of the best action movies of all time.
Agreed.
While at the same time having all these little artistic touches, all these little flourishes, like the thing we were talking about with the swamp, you didn't need to shoot it that way.
Yeah.
There were quicker, easier ways to shoot it that would have still been effective and no one would have seen any shortcomings with, but you did something different.
Yeah, if the world feels lived in and fully realized, it's being done with an attention to detail that most forgettable action movies aren't.
Yeah.
Like every Avengers movie, the world doesn't feel realized. I think that's one of the things that sets the Thor Ragnarok above even the later Thor, Blood, Love and Thunder, and all the other ones is it's in a place that feels lived in, right? Like the World, The Edge of Tomorrow has this like story behind it you don't really understand, except it's shown to you visually.
Yeah.
The first Guardians of the Galaxy movie with nowhere and all of these like set piece places that feel lived in, that feel like they have a story behind every like rock and corner. That's what makes something less cynical when it comes to being a product.
And one of the things that underlies that for me, and again, we talked about this off camera, is the fact that every single character in this movie except Max has a pretty substantial character development arc. But that all just happens by them functioning within the box that the movie represents. Other than Furiosa, no one gets any kind of traditional exposition about what their motives are and who they are. But you can see it in their actions and how they talk to each other. But it's all completely organic. Like when you're looking at it, it feels like this is how two people in this circumstance would talk. This is how somebody would react to this thing that's happening. But you can see all this character development. So again, yeah, it's product, but it is one of the most artistically legitimate products I think you're going to find.
Yeah, and the fact that you have a main like the named character of the first part of the movie backseating to the protagonist is such a non-traditional, non-linear storytelling mode that like you're taking a chance, and you're also respecting your audience to be able to absorb all this stuff for themselves and to be curious about the road the world you've created. I think that's the beauty of George Miller's typical like storytelling style is he's not afraid to tell a story in the art department, in the set design, and the costume design, versus the disrespect of like a more modern action film that just needs to straight up tell you who everyone is and what their motivations
You want
are.
a quick aside, by the way, about the costume design?
Sure.
So obviously our favorite movie and the greatest movie of all times, A Million Ways to Die in the West.
Yep, absolutely. 100%. People die at the fair.
People die at the fair, but Charlize Theron wears a wig through that entire movie.
Yep.
Because that was the movie she made on the heels of this after shaving her head.
That's right. And her head was completely shaved. Absolutely. Yeah. Also has the best Django cameo at the end of the movie. Speaking of which, speaking of Django, I might actually nominate that we watch Day Shift as a Grimdark movie, because I just recently watched it and it was completely unhinged in a way that I completely loved.
Nice.
Yeah, just for Django hunting vampires in modern LA.
I see no problems with any of this.
No, it's pretty fantastic. All right, well, we get woken up. We clearly didn't buy any of this disgusting merchandise, although a lot of it was offered to us. We are sent with some seed packets, which were the only things that we decided we were going to buy that the many mothers had left behind. And we stumble our way back towards the Citadel. We're accosted, of course, by the remaining war boys who are now living outside the city and dragged off to, I guess, wherever it is that war boys are put when they get a little bit too crazy. Where we have to look at what the war boys have, I don't know, carved in themselves. Because, like, I don't know if they can write, but they definitely know how to make markings.
They know how to,
do some drawings. They got a lot of scarification. So as we enter this sort of grim asylum of the war boys, we're going to talk about the themes we picked up in this movie.
As night descends, we scratch our messages into the walls. Future warnings for inmates of the Grim Asylum.
So in the Grim Asylum, what we talk about usually is how does this fit into the landscape of Grimdark? What makes us think of this as a piece of Grimdark media? What were the tones? We usually pick up about 3. What were the sort of like principles and tones and sort of overriding messages that we pulled out of this that makes us feel like it's Grimdark? And I'll start for this one. And the first sort of like overriding tone that I found, like, I think was the most sort of like prevalent to me was dystopia. The fact that we have a society that has collapsed to the point where water is a fundamental resource that everyone needs to have. And therefore, if you control the water, you control all life around you. Immortan Joe's sort of like, I guess, like patriarchal, weird sort of like governing system where his family is going to be this thing that has a legacy forever. His obsession with his brides and his stuff. And the fact that all of these societies form up, so like Bullet Town and the gas farm, form up around a commodity that's considered essential, and that is the defining feature of the people who are part of it. So like drinking this tainted water has created the war boys, right? And that's why all the people that are not sick drink the milk, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
That's what I got out of that. And that the structures and hierarchies of society are entirely linear, like from bottom to top. You have the lowest level of society at the bottom of the Citadel, the highest at the top. In between are the war boys, basically protecting you from all that stuff. That idea that that's all that's left of civilization. You're either out in the wasteland alone, like resting with your demons, or you're in one of these like societies where there's a person that might eat you, like an accountant that might eat you, a crazy old bullet farming judge who, like, you know, is also the executioner and the judge and the sort of like overall like driving force of the society. And that even if you're living outside, you somehow have to deal with it because these things are just out there chasing you down. Like the raiders all needed to be bartered with, the war boys just roving around and acting in Morton Joe's will. That was the fact that when you encounter civilization, its dystopic sort of like elements are what create all the conflict was the big overriding message for me. And that even when societies collapse, that comes back every time because we're living in dystopia now.
No.
You know what I mean? It's just going to keep happening.
Gotta have a class system.
Even when it's all leathers and feathers.
How would you know where everybody belongs if you didn't have a class system?
That's it. All right, what about for you?
So I started with my newest, oldest chestnut, which is barbarism.
Okay.
And not just for the most obvious reason. So the most obvious reason is obviously this is a society governed by violence, take what you can, all that sort of thing. But the big thing for me was the actual war boys themselves. Like this is clearly, so this is a concept we've seen in other post-apocalyptic media, right? Where you've got a figure that is obviously older and knows things about the before time.
Mm-hmm, yep.
And he has created a society that is a mix of sort of pop culture Vikings and pop culture barbarians, right? Like the fact that their ultimate goal is to get to Vallhalla,
shining
like,
in chrome.
it's just right there.
Yep.
Like it's not understated. It's just right there. The fact that they all celebrate violence, the fact that when Nux and Slit are having the argument over who's going to drive because Nux should just stay there and die and Slit should take the car, and the fact that it ends with Nux headbutting Slit, taking the wheel. And even though Slit is the bigger, stronger guy, as soon as that happens, there's like the laugh, the hug, because that's their culture.
Yeah, their culture is one of brutality and the rule of the strong.
The fact that when the first guy in the first chase scene gets shot through with a couple arrows and he falls down, like you see Nux peering through the window at him, and he's not sad, he's not upset, he just keeps going, get up. And then the guy gets up and it's the first time you see the spray into the mouth, and he does like a suicidal kamikaze charge.
A double like
at the guy who killed him, right?
He literally has a crossbow or an arrow like through his head.
Yeah.
At that point too, it's insane.
Yeah. But it's that, because it's not just that they are barbaric and they are brutal, but they actively celebrate that, and they've actively been manipulated into celebrating that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is a true sort of like again, an element of a society that its foundations are something other than what we have right now. And that it's not necessarily sustainable, because if it's always rule of the strong, you're going to push people down. You're going to run it as strong eventually. And the strong are all going to kill each other on the way up. My second was brutality for the same reason, is that everything is worked out through violence. There's never enough hope for negotiation. It's always straight to 11. There's no middle ground. There's no talking. There's no trying to reason Furiosa back. They just send out the war boys to go kill her and bring her back. We're in a society where violence is the one and only solution to all problems. And we don't even consider another option, right? Even the many mothers living out in the wasteland at the end almost immediately defer to like trapping and violence to try and get something from these people that they encounter. They don't try and they don't start off with like a negotiation. They start off with trying to dupe them into letting their guard down so that they can get whatever it is that they have.
It's important that we remember that Lieutenant Razak was always right.
That's right. Yeah, Razak's right. I don't. You know that was a parody, right? You know, Starship Troopers was a parody.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
No,
it was a parody.
No,
it was a parody.
My whole life has been a lie.
We weren't supposed to live like that. So what's your second one? Because we kind of agreed on the first one, or your first one.
It's funny. So your second is similar to my first. My second is similar to your first, but not the same. So you went with dystopia.
Yeah.
I went with decline. And it's embodied within just this movie,
Mm-hmm.
primarily for me by the whole driving through the place that you were trying to get to without realizing that it's already
It's already
been
gone.
ruined.
Yeah, in 20 years.
And again, as a franchise as a whole, it's at the start of the franchise, the Mad Max franchise, it's not that you have pockets of civilization and then the barbaric nothing. It's you have a lot of civilization and pockets of this barbarism and this brutality. And the thing that is implied through all of the movies and then is demonstrated in this movie in that scene is the fact that whatever your normal is, the decline, the entropy, the death, it's all creeping out that way. It's moving in every direction. You're not outrunning it. It's not a sunrise.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the fact that even if you knew something was okay, even if you knew it was good or better, it's slowly giving way. When you look at all these people, so again, so much is implied without being said, right? When you look at the Citadel and you think all these people, their teeth are rotting out of their heads, they're covered in boils, they're dying because the water they're drinking is tainted. Well, the water is also what's feeding all the plants and all the things that make it look like this is the new green space and this is the place that's going to be okay. But Brawndo is not what plants crave.
No. And it's the reason why Joe can't have sons, right? Everything's all messed up.
So even the stuff that is presented like, no, there's hope, there's that next thing. It's not really there. It's an illusion. It's a mirage.
That's why my third one's entropy. The idea that nothing's getting better, everything's into like slowly sliding into the abyss, is the overall message of this movie. Is that even having taken the Citadel, there's no guarantee life's going to get better. Life's going to get better for Furiosa and the brides. Does that mean they're going to be an egalitarian society? Does that mean the war boys are going to become better and that they're going to be treated better and stop being like a brutal regime of like Viking berserkers, basically? Does that mean that Max isn't still broken in the wasteland? This is an interlude in Max's story. He is still broken. He disappears afterwards. He does not have a happy ending in this. And in fact, the world doesn't, because all that we've learned throughout this entire story is that the world is still getting worse. Even 20 years after, 40 years after the original stories, where the world is in a worse place now than it was, that the salt flats could just literally be the oceans having been boiled off, that the many mothers in the green place is just now a toxic soup of like, gross swamp. There's nothing that's improving. There's no safe place to go to. And we're winding down humanity's existence. And that all of these triumphs, all the triumphs that Furiosa just had, ultimately we can't even really envision what the good in that's going to be in the future, because it's just another despot with another set of goals and values at the top of this pile now. And you watch her being raised into the air on this platform at the end of it all, and she's being held apart by the cheering people, and she's now becoming the overlord, going up into the sky. And what does that mean? What will that mean in the future? We have no idea. But we certainly know that the world around is still getting worse. The bullet farm's still out there. Gastown's still out there. The leaders are all dead, but the people are still there. How is this going to be any better in the future?
Yeah. So for my third one, it's funny, I actually put a question mark next to it. My third one was death.
Okay.
And death isn't as much, again, casual violence as there is at different parts in the story. Death isn't like this omnipresent factor. But at the risk of stating the obvious, because it's true of all of us in the real world as well, the inevitability of death is very much in front of you the whole time, right? Like,
a lot of people die in this movie.
Everyone dies at the fair.
Everyone dies at the fair. Everyone dies at the Citadel, apparently is what it is too.
So yeah, a lot of characters do actually die in the movie. But again, that implication that there's no safe food to eat, there's no safe water to drink, that there is no tomorrow, right? Like Furiosa might be okay, right? She might be okay at the end of this movie. But if you back up and say, so for the brides, will any of their kids be okay? Will any of their kids be born? Will they live to adulthood? Like,
what are they going to drink without the giant farm of women creating all the mother's milk? Like,
right.
How are they going to live?
So that's what I mean. Like in a less obvious way than is typical for an action movie, death is omnipresent. It's not the nature of that, as far as it leans into Grimdark, is not shown in the way that you can expect it to be shown in a conventional movie. Like if you just scratch the surface that tiny bit. It's that what's next question.
It's the outcome of that decline you're talking
Yeah.
about. If everything's in decline, and this is the inevitability of
If
everything
the
dying,
epilogue to this movie, if you did a post-credit scene and the epilogue was 1 year later, what would that look
and
like?
then the world died.
Yeah.
That's it's. We're not even talking about individuals. I think death is not personal in this. It's the world's on its way to die.
Again, I appreciate everything Coolio had to teach me.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have finished up with the Warboy corpse pile, trying to figure out what was scarified into their skins. Of course, there's the awesome Warboy symbol, which is like a flaming skull, because you can't have.
Which is awesome.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is we find a giant pile of flaming skulls.
Oh my God.
Right? So
why didn't I wear that shirt today? I have that on
I
the
know
shirt.
you do. I know you do. So what we find is we find a bunch of hood
Film
ornaments.
this whole thing.
A bunch of hood ornaments in the shape of flaming skulls, and we are forced to build a chair out of them as we rank this in the landscape of Grimdark Media.
As the light fades and the end draws near, where does this sit upon the throne of skulls?
All right, so in Throne of Skulls, what we do is we try and put this in order of our personal values, judgments, and where we think it sits both in the landscape of Grimdark compared to other games, movies, films, books, whatever, and just our personal taste. And so we have a few things that we very much disagree on,
Yep.
and a few things that we very much agree on.
Yep.
We're at 16 this week.
Yep.
I'm at 15. You're at 16. 'Cause I disqualified one.
I'm at
too
16
helpful.
because even though I keep forgetting one of the ones that's high on my list and have to shoehorn it back in afterwards.
So my 16th disqualified is World War Z because it was too helpful. It ended. The zombies didn't win. We bootstrapped ourselves back to life. I didn't think it qualified as Grimdark. What's your 16th?
And my 16th is World War Z. Yeah.
We're still in agreement on that one for at least 4 or 5 more.
For at least,
episodes.
yeah, exactly.
My 15 is Rangers of Shadowdeep.
Last of Us Part 2.
I know. You're still wrong about that. My 14th is Event Horizon.
You're still wrong about that.
I know. You hate me for that one too. There's two. We get the disagreements out of the way early in this one.
And then at 14, I've got Mordheim.
So in 13, I got the Book of Eli.
Oh yeah, we're fairly far apart on that.
We are
too.
fairly far
Keep
apart on
forgetting
that
about
one,
that. 13 for me is Astartes.
12 for me is Thundar.
12 for me is House of Hell.
The 11th for me is going to be Fury Road.
Oh wow. Okay, so we're
Mad
gonna
Max
be
Fury Road.
not super far apart, but a little far apart on
Okay.
that. So 11 for me is Roadside Picnic.
10 for me is going to be House of Hell.
10 for me is Thundar the Barbarian.
9 for me is Hard Boiled.
9 for me is Black Company.
8 for me is The Black Company because we're pretty much in the same place on this one.
8 for me is Mad Max Fury
Fury
Road.
Road, no way. 7 for me is Astartes.
7 for me is Book of Eli.
6 for me is Mordheim.
6 for me is Rangers of Shadowdeep.
5 for me is The Precipice of Corruption for Dungeon Crawl Classic.
5 for me, even though it's fairly high up, I keep forgetting to put it on my list, is Hard Boiled.
4 for me is Roadside Picnic.
4 for me is Event Horizon.
3 for me is The Call of Cthulhu.
3 for me is Precipice of Corruption.
And then 2 for me is The Last of Us Part 2 in the biggest, longest, widest swing.
That is the
opinions
widest
this
swing.
one, yeah.
Look at the bright side. In one more week after World War Z, we'll stop talking about
That's
that.
true, we will.
2 for me is The Thing.
And number 1 for me is The Thing.
And 1 for me is Call of Cthulhu.
All right. Our top doesn't change very much.
No.
The top doesn't change very much. The top is pretty great.
I think the last big move for me at the top was when we did Precipice.
Yep.
That moved up.
You put that one up high, yeah.
Yeah.
More time for me to push down Astartes, A Black Company, and Hardboiled and House of Hell a little bit. My top 10 right now are House of Hell, Hardboiled, Black Company, Astartes, Mordheim, Precipice of Corruption, Roadside Picnic, Call of Cthulhu, Last of Us Part 2, and The Thing. What's yours?
So 10 to 1 would be Thundar, Black Company, Fury Road, Book of Eli, Rangers of Shadowdeep, Hard Boiled, Event Horizon, Precipice of Corruption, The Thing, and Call of Cthulhu.
Wow. I love that Event Horizon's that high for you.
It super is.
It's your ghost ship.
It's my sci-fi ghost ship.
It's your
Ghost
sci-fi
ship is my ghost ship.
Ghost ship is your ghost ship, yeah. So we've just done film media again.
Maybe that's what I need to do. I need to do as a trilogy. I need to do Event Horizon, Ghost Ship, and Last Voyage of the Demeter. So it can be
the boat
my
trilogy?
my historical ghost ship.
Maybe
my
we
ghost
should
ship,
do that.
ghost
Maybe
ship,
we
and
should
my
do that
sci-fi
as
ghost
like a
ship.
patron watch along Sunday. We'll stream those 2 movies like 3 weeks.
I'm on a boat, y'all.
Yeah,
I'm on a boat, y'all.
We'll do booze cruise. We all sit in the basement and drink and stream with the patrons.
Total tech.
Bodal tech. Grimdark Booze Cruise, where we watch shitty old boat movies, and
Get
actually
depressed.
none of those are actually, they're all great movies.
Ooh, Lifeboat.
Oh, Lifeboat.
Lifeboat.
Oh, was that the made for TV one?
No, that's the Hitchcock one with the survivors in the lifeboat after they get sunk by a German U-boat.
Yeah, no, I know that one. But what about the one that was the sci-fi one?
Oh.
It was called Lifeboat. There was like a made for TV sci-fi one that was like that too. It was
remember that.
amazing. Shit. I know the Hitchcock one. Yeah, Lifeboat's an incredible film. Recently remade as The Life of Pi. So
Wait, are you saying the tiger was a U-boat crew member?
maybe. The tiger definitely wasn't the cannibal trying to eat the U-boat member. Okay, so we are up next with game media. And we had a patron like pick for us. And it's not really a patron pick, but it was something that was mentioned to us so many times. I think we probably ought to just do it.
Sure.
And it's called Pathologic 2. And it's very cheap right now on Steam and also on I think it's on a bunch of the the networks like Sony Network and Xbox Network. But apparently it is the grimmest and darkest of like these like short form video games. So
Cool.
We're going to check out Pathologic 2. Neither of us have ever played this before.
I've never even heard of it.
I haven't either. So this feels like a good one to do like blind and jump in and just like try something because we haven't done a video game in a while and I want to do a video game.
Cool.
It feels like it would be a good break from our normal like let's just pick things we already like.
Yeah.
And we actually get to like go through and talk about
I'm always excited to hear like something I haven't seen before.
Exactly. So that's gonna be in a week, and we will be doing. I guess after that is going to be the literary pick, and it's your turn. So you get to pick book. So get thinking about it.
Yeah, my problem is I'm struggling because I've got something that I want to pick for book, game, and video, and
Yeah.
I can't decide which one I want to use it for.
That's fair enough. I mean, that's true. Yeah, when it hits all three media, it gets
Yeah.
complicated. It gets
That's the
complicated.
problem.
Right, sweet. All right. Well, thanks for this. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you for more Grimdark Media, and of course, the patron pick for being, I think in May is going to be game. And we're putting that one up soon. So after this airs, I'll put up the poll for what the game pick is going to be for you guys. Oh, no, wait. They just did more time. They did more time. Is that? Oh, it's book. It's book for them this
book,
time around.
okay.
So it'll be book for May. And we'll put that up in May when this has gone live. So thanks for watching. We'll see you for more Grimdark Media. Happy working.
What a lovely day.
Thank you, lovely listener, for checking another episode of Grimdark Media. We'll be back with Pathologic 2, our pick for game media for May, and you can get your vote in for the literary media at patreon.com/GuerrillaMiniatureGames. Have a good one.